Hi. Notes. You'll see here my job today. It's not necessarily a fun job. Scold humanity. I don't want to be the one who has to scold humanity, but I am apparently. And I'm not happy at the moment with people's level of understanding of the way the universe works. So, I'm going to leave a very scoldy message to humanity here on YouTube in this particular episode of Eric's Philosophy Talk videos. I'm going to title this one something involving scolding, probably. I don't know. We'll see what I title it. I'll come up with something. Scold humanity. Let's start by setting up some metaphors and analogies here. First, let's define understanding. Understanding is a linkage to a simpler set already turned on. To say that a set is turned on, it means that it is fully functional within your symbolic sets and your functionality as, and this is the next thing we need to define, is in this analogy we're going to assign people the status of servers. That's, for a long time since computers came out, it's been very popular to compare human beings when thinking about consciousness and stuff to computers. It's not a good comparison because people think of computers as their tools that they use. Instead, it's better to think of people as servers. First of all, we function much more like servers than like a desktop computer or a laptop computer. And second of all, people aren't familiar with servers, what they do and how they work, in a way that they are with, say, a laptop, which I think is important because we want to understand the basics of how human beings work while remaining clear on the fact that how we individually work is very hugely, massively different than how some other person works. We're remarkably different from one another, human beings are. It's surprising how different we are, how architecturally different we are in terms of our cognition. Anyway, so we imagine ourselves to be a server. A server has 4 modules. Well, a server doesn't, but our kind of server does. The 4 modules are to serve, to put. So if somebody asks you a question, you're going to access existing data, put. So, Mr. Strauss, do you have any kids? Yes, I have one child. Her name is Delilah. She is 16 years old. She attends Temple City High School. You've made a server request. I put. Okay? I put to you whatever you requested. Second module is get. The server goes to find somebody else's web server and gets information from them. So I ask somebody else, what time is it? They tell me 5:25. And then I've gotten that, and it's now mine. I get to keep it. It goes somewhere in here. Create. That's the third module. And that's where you make new content. However, it's important to remember that much of our, depending on what kind of person you are and how you live and what interactive modality you prefer, most of us are going to spend a great deal of our time feeling as though we're not choosing to make the meanings that we're making because they're sort of descriptions of events in the domain of, or the dimension of physical reference, which I will henceforth refer to as doper, the dimension of physical reference, which is, stuff in the world. Okay, so when we talk about understanding, we're talking about linking with existing data sets or symbol sets and reconfiguring symbol sets accordingly. So if I understand symbolic logic, but I don't understand quantitative symbolic logic yet, in other words, I don't know how to represent sum in in symbols. There exists at least one example of. Yeah, and that's normally how it's taught, right? They teach you all the simple conditionals and stuff like that, and then they include a little bit of set theory when they're talking about, oh well, some squirrels have red eyes, and there's 100,000 squirrels here, so at least one of them almost certainly has red eyes. That's not deductive reasoning, really, but it's perfectly sound nevertheless. Okay. So, to understand is to link and to reconfigure. If I'm linking, I see it all the time with the kids. If I'm talking to them about, that's how I teach. I say to them, we have enumerated powers for federal government. I'm going to give them an example that they can understand very clearly. Because they don't understand, the problem is they don't understand what one might empower government to do, what one would want to empower government to do, if one were to be in this idyllic situation of knowing everything but not having been governed heretofore and having to decide what it's going to be, right? So I have to give them a meaningful analogy, and obviously I go to the classroom and say, okay, well, imagine a classroom where your teacher puts a set of rules up. They're not rules of things you have to do. They're not rules of things you can't do. They're an exact list of everything you can do. So, if the list says you can write, you can listen, you can raise your hand. If I call on you after you raise your hand, can you talk? No, that's not on your list. Can you breathe? No, it's not on the list. They understand that idea, right? When you call it enumerated powers, you're saying, from now on, we're going to use this symbol pack to explain all that shit. This concept of a list of rules that's not prohibiting and not requiring, but is simply a list of all of the available options to you. And if it's not on that list, you can't do it. The reason it's not familiar to them much in real life is because we structure almost none of our institutions in that fashion, right? When you go to, it would be impossible. You can't make that sort of, you can't make those kind of rules for individuals, because individuals, I mean, can you imagine how long that list would be? Oh, well, it doesn't say I can allow my heart to beat. So you did say I can breathe. You added that to the list. Great. So should I stop my heart beating? Oh, that would be stopping it. It doesn't say I can stop it either. Oh, I'm confused. It's too easy to destroy, right? The only way you sustain rules like that are crazy restrictive, and you don't sustain them, is what happens. But the only way you can even attempt it is to ensure that the process is deliberative and the process is biased against the ability of the governing body to do anything. They'll still manage to do some stuff, and ideally they'll do the stuff they're supposed to do. Okay, so if understanding is linking and reconfiguring symbol sets, then in my example, they've now linked an imagined classroom, a hypothetical classroom, in which students are given a list of rules of things they can do, and they visualized in their head me like hamming it up and going, oh, I can't breathe, or whatever. They've got a connection now in their head between that visual stimuli, the auditory input I've given them, the concept, the word, and then this is the last part that actually gets to stick, is the term that we're going to use to represent the whole package, because it's the easiest and least important, right? Once they understand what everything is in that package, then you remind them enough times, that package is called enumerated powers, enumerated powers, enumerated powers, they get the idea. The problem is that it's meaningless to get the term without really truly understanding the idea first, because then the term's not really useful to you. What it is absolutely very useful to do, though, is to expose people to those terms before they understand them. because it prepares them to remember all meaningful things in life are the consequence of set completion. So that's what we're going for here. When the set is complete, they have the label. They understand everything that goes in the box and everything that is not allowed to go in that box and everything that might go in that box and why. And how do they understand it? Well, it means they link that to existing symbol sets that are simpler, that they have a good conception of. So, but what is at the bottom? Understanding. I don't get it. Well, understanding at the bottom is like machine code, but with language, instead of being a bunch of strings of ones and zeros, it's a strings of phonemes. And at the bottom level, its language is a one-to-one correlation between a certain string and a given noun, which is name in Latin. Noun means name in Latin. Pencil. That's language. It's a name. Okay? So at the very bottom, that's where you get your understanding from. Food. You're using the word wrong, right? So, if I'm trying to get food from somebody and they keep handing me a rock, I say, no, I want rocks. 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 Here's some rocks, dude. No, I said rocks. That's gonna hurt my teeth. What is this thing? That's not rocks. Yeah, those are rocks, dude. That's a rock. Well, what am I asking for then? What's that called? Seems to me you want food. Food? Food? Like rude? I've never even heard this word before. Food? You mean rocks? No, dude, they're not called rocks. At some point, it's going to make the connection that rocks, food. Just like Lacey. She made the distinction, my dog, between... She knows when I'm leaving the house and she might be able to go along, or when I'm going then out of the house and there's no chance for it. And the distinction she made is if I just taken a shower and put on fancy clothes, she never even gets up to or not in fancy clothes. She's not saying she can tell my clothes are fancy or not, but if I've just gotten out of the shower and gotten dressed, she knows she can't go. She understands that symbol. To her, that's all it is, right? My behavior is nothing but a symbol to her as to what she should expect going forward in the next 15 minutes or whatever. So, that symbol is useful to her, this visual symbol of me putting on clothes. And it's a true symbol insofar as it's almost always consistent with her expectations, which is ultimately what truth is for all of us. And to the extent that it's more, we can point to only consistency with consensus usages and functionalities. It's entirely utility-based and purpose-based. Remember that. Okay, so dogs can have understanding. People can have understanding. And the understanding comes from an understanding of what a symbol comprises and what it does not comprise. Okay, so to understand a little bit about the world better, we need to understand this guy. There's a philosopher guy. It may be Foucault. I don't remember the name. I know that is a philosopher. I'm not sure if he's the one who did this thing. We talked about this thing called the simulacrum. How, as we're moving away from doper stuff, remember, dimension of physical reference. We're moving away from doper stuff. We end up comprising almost all of our existence in symbols. This philosopher fellow feels as though this is horrible, that we need to revert to some state of nature. I don't know what exactly his point is. It doesn't matter what exactly his point is, except that it's anti. It calls us to task for failing to understand symbols correctly. He's right about that. We do fail to understand symbols correctly, and we do fail to understand them for what they are. However, he is wrong to think that they are less than doper stuff. If in fact he thinks that, I don't know. I've not read it. I just get the gist of shit. It's more. It's not less. It's more. It's more real. So the thing about our symbols is what he's saying is, if he's saying this, let's just pretend he is. We're going to call him Eric's Foucault, who says what Eric wants him to say. Okay. So Eric's Foucault is saying, this is terrible that we are so caught up in our symbolic representations that we are unable to recall that they're just symbolic representations. And we end up sort of running around all day long for a shiny star, and then we get home and we're like, yes, I got the shiny star, and then everybody around us is like, oh, he got the shiny star. And nobody's stopping to go, that's not an actual thing, guys, it's just a shiny star. Why is everybody all blah, blah, blah? Well, because that shiny star is the actual thing. It is whatever its value is, according to existing manifestations of identity within the available identity ocean. Identity construction materials ocean. So if we give the task to construct our own identity and to contribute to understanding by other agents, and to contribute to the construction projects of other agents and constructing their own identities, then it would obviously make sense that we would need to understand why exactly we are choosing to live in a symbolic world rather than a physical world. Okay, so first of all, understand this. If we think about the times of the server, which is our current era, I mean, it's in its infancy in some sense, but it's moving along so quickly. A time of times, we are beginning the time people win. The time people eventually win. Time wins, okay? Time's more powerful than space by an infinite measure. What space has and its advantage is it's obstructionist by nature. It gets in the way to make things more difficult for time. Time objects have a gravity towards change. So, what happened way back in human history is there needed to be some means by which a time object could be made to stay put. It could have permanence. We wanted it. People wanted that to occur. And there were multiple kinds of time objects that they had to deal with. One was image, the sight of something. Another was sound, audio. Another was concept, idea. And so what did we do in order to try to get these time objects to stay put? Because the only kind of objects we knew that actually did stay put, that had stasis, were doper objects. Rocks, trees. Trees didn't even stay put, right? They changed all the time. Leaves fall off them, leaves go back on them. Sometimes they get struck by lightning, whatever, There aren't that many objects that have something approaching stasis in doper even. However, scale allows us to be confused about that. So because our scale is so small compared to the world, when we look at the mountains, they look the same year after year after year after year after year. We're not that close to them. We can't really see all the little minor changes. The mountains are unchanged. They just sit there. They don't do anything. They don't take any action that we can see. Action is taken upon them, perhaps, but they don't appear to take independent action. Oh, wait, there's a landslide. Okay, well, Well, rocks don't do that on their own, we're pretty sure. So that's obviously the spirit of the mountain. And he's mad because you were talking too loudly. I was mad at you too. So I don't blame him, spirit of the mountain, for doing that shit. Alright? Because you are annoying. Because people need an explanation of why we interpret all actions and events in our lives through the filter of purpose, either our own or thinking about what potentially the purpose of others might be. Okay, so we wanted to make permanence, and what did we do? We came up with pictographs. Limitations were twofold. One, not all people draw well. Two, what about object subsets? Well, yeah, I see that's a picture of a rock, but I want to indicate boulder, rock, pebble, medium-sized pebble, whatever, you know. And there's a lot of, it doesn't really handle there's all sorts of shit that it doesn't do well, right? Pictographs. It's hard to picture abstractions that aren't visual in nature. Like, how do you picture justice? What does it look like? Well, you got a lady with a blindfold and that's an association we've made to choose to have a visual icon be a representative symbol of justice. It doesn't actually look like justice, right? In the way that a picture of a deer looks like a deer. Okay, so start with these pictograph things. What happens? You realize you're on the wrong fucking course. Partway into this, you're like, oh my god. Every new word we come up with, we have to come up with a new picture for it. Who designed this fucking system? This is a terrible approach. There's got to be a better way to do this. The problem is, once a bad idea gets inertia, if it achieves functionality to some extent, then it's always going to be easier to achieve that functionality in the short term with a bad, inefficient way of doing it than it is to fix the program architecture. And so what do you end up with? How many Chinese people are there? Like 3 billion? You end up with 3 billion fucked Chinese people. Why? Because it was easier to just keep using those pictographs than to actually learn an alphabet or to come up with an alphabet. There was entrenched inertia. The inertia of doing things the way they've been done before, of using existing algorithms, existing recipes. And of course, all your algorithms and recipes are of two kinds, right? They're either space or time. It's fine to do that with space algorithms and recipes because they're consistently applicable. When you try to do it with time recipes and algorithms, you're fucked. You have to do the pre-work. This is what we're learning now, being that we are able to function as those hypothetical servers I'm talking about, right? That's what we're doing. I'm actually doing it, but everyone's doing it to some extent or not. I'm building a website where I'm putting every little thing about myself and about all the people around me, and I'm going to try to draw an abstract understanding of humanity, of why and how human agents exist. I have to know the answer. I do know it more or less, but I have to figure out all the details still. Anyway, here's my little drawing of, if you wanted to do what somebody at some point thought, this would be the most intuitive way to get there. Alright, so we don't want to draw a picture of this thing, but what the hell else are we going to symbolize it for? How about those noises we make when we say that word? How do you symbolize noises? Noises. What? I don't get it. Well, look, when you say food, your mouth looks like that. So let's make an F like this. When you say, what is this? You? Yeah. You, ba, puh. Okay, so you see these little mouth shapes. You can imagine that if one was going to segue into alphabet, obviously the most intuitive way to deal with this problem is to draw a picture of it. It's so simple, it's so obvious. And it's so not thinking out the taxonomy and the architecture of your whole fucking program. And then you end up, like I said, like China, and you get stuck with it for the rest of your civilization's history. Or America with its English weight system. Now, I personally would be dead set against any metric, change the metric, but that's less harmful than the pictographs alphabet thing. And the reason it's less harmful is because just because it's a clumsy exchange system between units, who cares? I mean, the thing about that is you're only expressing one concept. So, alright, fine. We picked a shitty way to process those concepts of units of weights and distance and stuff. But it's all of its damage is contained. It doesn't spread at all. But, as opposed to on language, when you have diseases like that, they harm millions and billions of people. Why do you think China is inadequate in terms of real intelligence? Why? And they are. The whole country. It's devoid of real intelligence. It's pretty simple. It's communitarianism. They prioritized the preferences of some individuals for certain symbolic systems and certain algorithms. They made that the determining factor in which algorithms and systems should become predominant. They allowed hierarchy, tradition to trump efficiency and reality. At some point, in non-alphabetic countries, cultures, many people said, ridiculous to have to make these symbols all the time, but there we go. Alright. What prompted this whole goddamn thing? My reparations post on Facebook. So I put a really sneaky reparations post up on Facebook. It sounds racist, and it sounds like it's opposed to or against people with disabilities. But if you read it carefully, it's not at all. And the point I'm trying to make is I want to force as many people as I can to come face to face with the contradiction between their beliefs about race and all that is good, true, and just. Race is a bad lie. Let me give you some background on race. Okay, so it's true that when servers aren't connected to one another universally, but connected to one another in small sets. For example, if I'm at a university and I have a closed server system of some sort where all the computers in the university can talk to one another, but none of them can talk outside of the university. Let's just pretend that I've got one system set up just for that. It would be like North Korea system, right? My computers in North Korea, in theory, could talk to each other, but they can't talk at all with computers anywhere else in the world because they're worried about getting hacked. Now, let's just pretend that's the case. You could question the validity of that statement or not. It doesn't matter. The point is the point. Obviously, those servers in North Korea are going to differentiate substantially from the servers elsewhere. But functionally, they've got the same set of core functions available to them. Getting, putting, creating, understanding. And it's going to be some combination of those functions that they use to construct their virtual identity. And their virtual identity is going to be not a single thing. It's going to be ideally, every person has his or her own virtual identity, and it's true whether you've ever seen a computer before or not. Your virtual identity is the symbol that says, this is who I would be if I were persistent over time in the manner that we all pretend we are. And I would have these attributes, I would use these labels. And that if one were to play along with this, let's pretend we are beings in stasis, and you were to use these adjectives to draw conclusions about me, and then you were to see me behave, you would be more likely to find my behavior consistent with those expectations than non-consistent with those expectations if you drew those expectations by applying a standardized set of linked equivalencies between sets. If you use that kind of symbol set that's in standard compliance with linked equivalencies with other sets, then fine, you could probably expect me to behave as you expect me to behave. Obviously, we don't want to have to remind each other constantly, all the time, of what's actually going on. So, for example, if I'm an end user going on the internet and and there's a link that says sign up today for our newsletter. What it actually means is type your email address into this box, click this other thing, blah, 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 blah. And what it means to the server software is send input data to this SQL database table, put it there, or write it there on the database table. I guess write, So put is put, but write is create, I guess. Put that WC. Actually, the thing is, we have write and we have read, but they're largely automatic. We don't even. That's our own back end. It's like the stuff that happens underneath the surface where we don't even really process it. Write and read. In other words, I don't have to think. Although I might sometimes, but I don't have to in general to think. Oh, I got stabbed. If it's something dramatic, especially. Got stabbed today on the way to work by a mugger. I better remember that. Otherwise, tomorrow I'll be likely to forget and I'll get stabbed again. I need to try to remember to learn from this. When somebody comes with you at a night very slowly saying, I'm going to stab you, I'm going to stab you. Next time I'm going to remember. Walk away from them. Don't just wait and see what happens. Well, you're not going to remember. You're not going to forget that, right? Most things you don't forget, but we have a lot of little details that we do forget all the time, right? The most important things you don't forget. Things that you determine to be important. So, code architecture differentiation requires extended isolation. That's what happened with human agents is, as servers, we were isolated from one another extensively enough that there became differentiations occurring. Some of the differentiations actually even occurred on a physical level, and those are of no significance whatsoever. But for example, people from Africa, if a person's evolutionary set, like history or whatever, if its set of ancestors lived primarily in Africa, those individuals who now live wherever, they tend to have darker skin than, say, individuals whose ancestral gene pool comes from Europe or something. So this tends to, they also, it's ridiculous to focus specifically on this particular thing, right? They've got all kinds of different physical features, but I guess the point is, well, this one you can generalize easily enough because they all seem to have kind of slightly darker skin. And we all seem to have kind of slightly lighter skin, so that's a more general differentiation. It more generally applies, so therefore it's more important. No, it's not important at all. It's not. It's like, these things can't all be the same. Well, what do you mean? They're all apples. Yeah, but that one is slightly smaller than these ones. Well, I know they're not exactly the same. But they're still all apples. Okay. Now, let me understand what's much, much more harmful than any sort of physical differentiation between individuals is the cultural isolation aspect. And the reason for this is because there's always going to be an instinct towards risk management, which is acceptable and normal and understandable. And there will always be a desperate need to not let those people make any decisions. Those people don't understand that their concern about risk and their modifications to a plan to minimize risk, if it's a time object. Now look, if we're talking about, if it's a plan related to time objects, if it's a plan related to space objects, no problem. And this is the key thing. People don't make that differentiation. Oh, should we do blah, 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 blah? Well, the question is, okay, is blah, 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 blah a time object or a space object? Should be everyone's very first fucking question. Oh, it's a time object? Well, let's let the time people deal with this. We space people are horrible in dealing with this. We'll end up with a bunch of fucking authoritarian nonsense. If we like stasis. We don't understand reality. Oh, but how about putting up this building? Don't let Eric near that thing. You are going to kill thousands of people. He is incapable of making simple measurements and seeing if something's straight or not, okay? So, do not let the time people over here when you're building this goddamn building. Don't fucking let the space people in the policy-making arena. Why? Because they think that you can deal with agency as though it were static, like objects, like buildings and shit. We're not buildings. We're infinitely more powerful than anybody's ability to symbolize time objects into stasis. I can do it as well as anybody in the fucking world. I can write some symbolic representation of some time object, and it can be fucking sick. Just like, boom. Wow, you can feel the resonant symmetry of the whole goddamn thing. It just rolls off the tongue. Who fucking cares, right? I can't defeat myself for 5 minutes. How can a codification of an ineffable value into stasis through language possibly be a good way to achieve policy? It can't. That's how. So, what we do have, fortunately, are some principles that we can test our symbolic codifications with that are reliable. And the reason they are reliable is because they specifically find the exact joint whereby we can make the cut. It's called the principle of non-interference. So, if we wish to have a good and healthy and free society, we must base this society on the principle of non-interference. In order to do this, we must begin educating children first and foremost in identity construction. We say, okay, hey, it's your first day of school. You begin formally today your process of identity construction. Here's some virtual space, web space. We're going to talk about we're going to do big overviews here. I know you're in kindergarten, but we need to start in the metaphysics immediately. You won't even touch like fucking stupid math and science and history shit until maybe like junior high or high school. Because up until then, you need to focus entirely on the languages you will need. You need to focus on coding languages. You need to focus on developing languages of music, understanding pitch. Especially if you're a time person, if you're a space person, you got bad pitch, you don't want to do it, you shouldn't go near it. It's a waste of your fucking time. If you really like it, go for it. Then it's not a waste of your time. Because that's determined by individual agent's purpose. An individual agent might say, society ought to be this, society ought to be that. But there is only one person who can say that and not contradict themselves. And that is the person who is saying society ought to enforce a principle of non-interference. Now, just to make clear, symbols, what they do is they are rules of inclusion and exclusion that are tested and executed in interconnected bunches. Once you've established as part of your identity certain symbol sets, those certain symbol sets will fit comfortably with other kinds of sets, will fit uncomfortably with other kinds of sets, and will absolutely preclude some sets, and will absolutely necessitate some other sets if you want to keep this. Keeping in mind that you can always meta up, right? You can install new modules on top that explain those apparent contradictions. And ultimately, that is where humanity's deepest and most meaningful truths are found. When you say words or write words and you want to make an impact on humanity, that is what your words need to do. They need to reconcile contradictions. Reconcile apparent contradictions. Meaningful truths inherently are paradoxical because meaningful truths have to wrestle with the implicit contradictions of the universe, that these two fundamentally oppositional forces of time and space coexist and mush together, even in light, in sound, mush together. You have a dimension of stasis that's required for physical manifestation of frequency. But that frequency does not require the physical world to exist. I can't visualize an image in my head very well, not very precisely. But I can hear a tune, a melody, that's exactly the same entity every time. I can choose to vary it up if I want in terms of, rhythm and syncopation and stuff, but oh Christmas tree, how lovely are your branches. Oh Tannenbaum, how lovely are your ranch dressings. Meow, 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 meow. It's the same song. It's the same melody. It doesn't matter. But I'm singing it different each time, right? It has identity permanence because it has no spatial permanence. They are opposite. Things that have more spatial permanence have less identity permanence. Rocks functionally have no identity at all. They're unremembered. They don't exist in that dimension very much. At least they have no agency. But the key thing isn't that they have no agency, it's that they are space objects. A frequency is the perfect example of a time object. I can sing it out loud, but I hear it just as clearly in my head. That time object has permanence when it becomes part of a completed set. And it has permanence for as long as there are servers around to kick it back and forth. It's more than a symbol. It's an entity. It's real like a rock is real. Like this is not a symbol of sunglasses to me. Sure as hell is to you. What are you watching, actual sunglasses on your screen? You're not. Are these real sunglasses or symbolic sunglasses? Well, To me, right this second, as I'm saying these words, they are real. From every moment forward from the completion of this video, they will be symbolic to me and to anybody else who sees the video. They're symbolic to you right away because you're not the one who has them on your face. Here's the deal with reparations. Of course, reparations is the stupidest idea in the world. They're so goddamn racist. Race is the worst of all, unlike gender. Gender's real. Imagine a mean grand uncle who's raising 4 kids whose parents have died in a car crash. Little Tommy is told for his whole childhood that he has the mark of Miyup. The mark of Miyup. The mark of Miyup. You have the mark of Miyup. You're not fully human, you're inferior. You have to do all the chores around here, and your brothers and I are going to enjoy ourselves. But why? Why, grand uncle? Why are you so mean to me? Because I said you have the mark of Miyup. What is that? It's the thing that makes you inferior. But what is it? It's the mark of Miyup. Now get to work. I do this for this poor child's entire life. He grows up desperate to learn more about the mark of Miyup. He starts researching it, starts writing about it on the internet. Can't find anything at first. There's nothing up there, right? Starts writing about the mark of Miyup. Then some other scholars start being curious about his writings, and they start referencing them in their writings. And pretty soon, it becomes quite a highly considered idea. Hey, you know what? I think we've figured this out. We've got this mark of Miyup. We see a number of different people who are victimized in the fashion of this individual was victimized by his granduncle. And it's pretty clear that society has a serious problem with people who hate the mark of Miyup and think that people who have the mark of Miyup are inferior. And Miyupists are everywhere. Miyupists are people who hate people who have the mark of Miyup, and they are one of society's biggest problems. Cops start killing a bunch of people. Arbitrarily, murdering them for no reason. These people start protesting. The mark of Miyup. The mark of Miyup is okay. It's good to have the mark of Miyup. They're just as good as we are. They're better than we are. We should feel guilty for everyone who has the mark of Miyup. We're mad at you, cops. You hate Miyups. You're Miyupists. Okay, guys, look. There's no fucking mark of Miyup. It's just a make-believe thing. Alright? The problem isn't that the cops hate Miyups. The problem is the cops are fucking killing innocent people. They are violating individual rights. They are violating the principle of non-interference. That's the problem. When you are talking about these Miyups, first of all, I'm pretty sure those are people, last I checked. And have you determined whether each and every one of the people that you're choosing to call Miyups wants to be identified as a member of that group? Or even if he does want to be identified as a member of that group, does that mean that he wants to accept all of your understandings of what that means? Because last I checked, he and every other person on the planet is an individual. First and foremost. Yeah, but they hate Miyups. They don't fucking hate Miyups. Miyups doesn't even exist. They're authoritarians. They're space people. They love stasis. And they think that it helps to engage in violence against anyone that threatens their expectations of what static reality ought to be, even though their expectations are inherently absurd because reality doesn't work like that. But who do we have to blame? Not them, not the cops. I mean, They didn't pull that guy over for the purpose of shooting him. At least not officially. That's not the symbol path they used. What is a symbol path maker? Symbol path is the only thing that matters. I mean, after all, cops don't ever say we killed him because he was black. So why are we so concerned about the race of the person who's being killed? Well, because... Well, that's not what the cop said. He didn't say he killed him because he was black. Well, that's the point. We need to prove that they really are racist. You mean you need to prove that that person really was Miyuyup? And that the cops really do hate Miyuyups? Are you sure that person was black he killed? Well, he's got dark skin. Does that make him black? What does that mean, black? Well, it means he came from Africa. When? Like yesterday? No, like, 100 years ago. He's over 100 years old? Well, not him. I mean, his great-grandparents. They came from Africa? Yeah. When was that? Like, 1800 or whatever. So what fucking difference does that make? This guy's not been to Africa ever. But he's black. Well, how do you know? You said you knew because he was from Africa. He's not even from Africa. He's from here. Well, you can tell he's black. How? His skin is darker. Your eyes are blue. Does that mean you're blue? No. Blue's not a race. And black is? Yeah. Okay, what is it then? It's being from Africa and having dark skin. Or you could be from Mexico and have dark skin, and then that's a race too. Is it? Okay, so how is this different than blue eyes? Because one's a race and one's an eye color. Okay? Only white people would ask that question. So now you say that he can't ask that question because his skin is darker? No, I'm saying you're so privileged. And you just don't understand. That's why you say those things. If you were black, you wouldn't say anything. Wait, so they're black, so they can't say those things? They can't say things? Why are you saying who can say things based on their skin color? I mean, that's crazy. This is just one organ, right? We've got all kinds of organs around us, and this is like the least important one. It just holds in your guts and your bones and shit, right? Otherwise your blood would all fall out. But it doesn't even do anything other than that, really. So why would you fixate so much on that? I'm more concerned about these cultural differences you're pointing out. Like, all these people that you say are Miyuyups, they're totally different. Like, this guy's into, arguing with me about philosophy shit, and that guy's into playing volleyball. And that guy's into... I've got some better models here than this race thing of yours. How about we go with Myers-Briggs personality types? What's their dominant cognitive functions? Why don't we group them by that instead of this? I mean, he's not even that much darker than me. Yeah, but you're tan, and he's naturally that color. Are you serious? So it doesn't count if I'm to be dark if I'm tan? Then I'm not black? So is it possible for me to become this thing that you say he is? No, you can't become it. You have to be born that way. What way? Like him. Well, with darker skin, huh? Okay, so if I were born with darker skin, I would be black? Yes. If your parents were black only. How much darker would my skin have to be? A lot. Are there any other physical markers that you can point to? Not without being racist. I see. So, Miyuyups are exactly the same as regular people, except they wear a different kind of hat or something, and except they're not even they, except if you were happening to wear this kind of hat, then you become one of them. Could I change, like, if I were to color my skin darker, could I become black? No, you can't become black. I'm sorry. Can I become Miyuyup? No. That's even worse than black. Worse? Yeah. I see. So who's racist now? That's right. It's the people who favor reparations. It's the people who favor talking about race and any other, unless they're metaing up like I do, in which case it's totally fine because I'm educating humanity. If you're talking about race, you're being divisive and unnecessary, and you are missing the fucking point. All right, it's not about goddamn race. It's like, and somebody, well, what about that Ferguson, court system and shit, and how they were charging all the black people different amounts and okay, yeah, they were Miyuyup haters, but the problem isn't that they were doing that to Miyuyups, it's that they were doing that at all. Right? That's the fucking problem. You're letting the government get away with crazy fucking nonsense when you only call them on that shit if it's a racist. Right? Why is the government of Ferguson pulling in so much money from the citizens in fines in a given year? Nobody cares until it turns out that a majority of those individuals self-identify as Miyuyups. We don't even exist! So, fuck you, race people. Fuck you all. I declare myself raceless. Actually, I declare myself all races and none concurrently.